evening, all. Welcome to the July 15th meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission. Appreciate everyone being here. We would like to welcome our newest member, Nick Neptune, joining us for the first time tonight. We now have a full commission. Yay. Yay. We did have quite a bit of long stack of meeting minutes this month. So I'm hoping everybody had a chance to do that. But what we'll do is we'll start with some introductions. We usually go to start down there with you, Nick. Just who are you and what committee are you on?
Well, my name is Nick Neptune. It's great to be here. And I'm serving on the Outreach Committee.
Thank you.
Mary Sell, Bicycle Committee.
Susan Hatchell, Chair.
Rebecca Profit, Community Outreach Committee.
Kier Tong, Bicycle Planning.
Paul Neville, Outreach Committee.
David Cox, City Council.
Kelly Woodall, Pedestrian Committee.
Excellent.
Eric Lamb, City Staff.
All Black, City Staff.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. I usually, yes, everybody did say their committee assignments, and I do appreciate that because we do have 3 committees. In addition to this meeting, those 3 committees are all public meetings that you're welcome to join if you have particular interests in community outreach, bicycles, or pedestrian issues. As I mentioned, we had very long, extensive minutes this time. Did anyone see anything? Could we have a motion for approval?
Yeah, I did review the minutes, and I think that they are very good, and I want to commend Rena for details of capturing all of the discussion on a number of the issues that we discussed at great length. So thank you, and I move that the minutes be approved as written.
Anyone like to second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent. Thank you so much. It is now time in our meeting for public comments. This is the opportunity for the public to come forward on issues that are otherwise not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes speaker. We love having guests and hearing from you directly. So is anyone here to speak with us this evening? Okay, nice and quiet tonight. But as a reminder, at any point, if you'd like to come to this meeting or the committee meetings, the separate committee meetings, you have an opportunity to come and tell us what you're thinking. We sure do appreciate it. You can also email us. We do appreciate that. All right, we will move on to staff reports. First thing, Eric, is the council update. I think the most important thing is our work plan.
Yes, so Mr. Otwell presented the Commission's proposed work plan at the July City Council meeting. And the City Council is on break right now, so they had their first Tuesday in July, and they'll reconvene at the third Tuesday in August. But the City Council had a couple of questions about the contents of the work plan and referred the item to the Transportation and Transit Committee. And so they will take that up in late August. So we will forward that once that's been finalized to the Commission, let you know when that's going to be if you're interested in attending and having some dialogue with the City Council regarding the work plan content.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to call Council Member Kay Crowder because I believe it was her who referred us to Transportation and Transit Committee, and Council's on break, so we're lucky to have Councilman Cox with us here today. He's not breaking, but I was told she won't be back until the 19th, and then that meeting is August 27th at 3 p.m. So we will, I think we'll have a new chair by then because our August BPAC meeting will be on the 19th. So I can certainly, I was told to give her a call back and see what the concerns were. So I don't think we can really take any action at this time, but it sounds like we will need to stay informed and get prepared for that meeting.
And we had an updated copy of the Commission's work plan for everyone this evening, so it's cleaned up from
Yeah, and one of the things that I was hoping each of the committees could do this evening, we were so rushed the last 2 meetings with very full agenda. I did want everyone to talk about what are the priorities coming out of the different commissions. I know we're missing a few people tonight, but at the same token, we do want to kind of talk about that work plan in terms of a lot of it's reactionary things that are just kind of ongoing, and then other things are things that we want to be proactive about. So it would be great, I think, if we would all sort of think about the things that we really, as committees, would like to push forward. So we'll do that when we get to that item. Anything else from council?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Could we get a digital copy of the work plan? I know we had previously, but thank
Happy
you.
to.
Yes, thank you for having that for us, but yes, good point. It'd be good to have that digitally. Staff report bike share update?
Fontaine?
So we have embarked with another series of bike share installs. So people may have seen the ones that have gone in at Chavis Wayne Davie by the Transfer Food Hall, Cameron Village, Walnut Creek Wetlands Center, and the one out front of the Raleigh Municipal Building. We are getting through the final steps for the remaining stations and hope to begin installing those in the next month.
Okay, how many are still not installed?
We currently have 6 remaining that need.
Okay, 6, we're almost there. And do you have any updates for us about ridership or anything of that nature? We're always interested to hear,
My numbers.
particularly since we're still so new, you know?
While I'm waiting for my numbers to pull up, we also had a temporary station for the Destination Dick's Sunflower event, and we got great feedback on that. They gave us a designated area. We had over 150 rides to and from the event.
Excellent.
So for bike share, we are at a total of 20,608 miles traveled and 10,854 trips. We continue to trend upward with user members signing up and gaining more members.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. Anything else on bike share? Do you have any questions? Bike month review. Are we still doing bike month review?
Yeah, it took us a while to get all the numbers together, but if you look in your packet, there
Perfect.
was a 2019 Bike Month
Yes.
summary with all the counts, and I think most of the things that you want to see are going to be in there. You'll also notice we're already planning for next year's Bike Month. We've got to sit down and get with Parks and Rec staff. The Parks and Rec ledger gets published very early. It has a long lead time, and we're going to see if we can't get in there for starters, and that's sort of the kickoff of next year's Bike Month is already going to be happening here in the next month or so.
Wow. Okay. Does anybody have any comments or questions about bike month? I guess I had a question, and I was wondering, do we have a pedestrian month, or is there such a thing?
We do, it's Walktober.
I know, but we're not kind of, you know, we're, huh?
You want more love?
I want to feel a little more love, you know? I just feel like there's a lot of national and state and, you know, broad bicycle things. So I think it would be really interesting to, as we talk about our work plan, to talk about how to promote Walktober a little bit more and do that. But this is great work, and it seemed like it was very successful, and every year it just grows. Anything else?
There was one note on the activities, and I was involved in this one. It was the Light Up the Night event. There's a comment that there were too many people. That was an issue. I hate to have that as a comment going forward. What is the intention to rescale the event or to try and manage more people as opposed to cutting it back?
That's actually not our event, we just help support that, but one of the problems we had was it got so big that we probably needed police escorts in some places. It was actually a little bit unsafe for the number of road guards that we had.
So perhaps we can do that for next year to improve the event, rather than try and restrict the number.
Yeah, and we're also looking at potentially moving the route and leaving from a place where staging will be a little easier. Crank Arm was very cramped, and there were issues with some of the valet parking with all the bikes assembling out in front, so we're looking at potentially staging that somewhere else, at least at the beginning of the ride.
Thank you. That's a lot better clarification. I appreciate that.
Anything else? Great. We'll move on to projects update. Mr. Lamb.
Yes, ma'am. So the commission had requested we do a comprehensive update of all the active capital projects that the city has underway. And so you've got several pages in the back of your agenda package that give an overview on each of those projects. A couple of major projects have been completed since the last time we did this review. The Mitchell Mill Road widening project in northeast Raleigh. That one has been completed. And then many of you are familiar with the Pullen Road extension and the Bellevue Street extension work that was done between Western Boulevard and Centennial Parkway. We have a new project that's underway over near Triangle Town Center. It's the widening of Fox Road between Spring Forest and Sumner Boulevard over in that area. And all these projects, for everyone's benefit in the audience and online, all these projects contain complete multimodal elements as far as the projects. In addition to street improvements, there are sidewalk and bicycle elements for each of these projects. We have a number of projects that are in production right now, and these are the projects that were authorized as part of the 2017 transportation bond. And so a number of these projects you'll start to see some activity on, most notably coming this summer, the pedestrian improvements along New Bern Avenue. Now, one of the things that's happened with that project that's interesting is that we're going through and doing accelerated work with the bus rapid transit project development in that corridor. We're looking to try and meet some federal submittal guidelines for federal funding and small starts projects by the end of the summer. And that's pushed us to look at potential overlap between the sidewalk and interim transit improvements that we already had on tap and what would be potentially disrupted as part of BRT construction. So we're doing a lot of close coordination on that and trying to minimize that because we don't want to go out and build something and have to rip it up in 2 years. So, but at the same time, we did make a very deliberate decision that because of the pedestrian crash history in the New Bern corridor, that having 2 years of facilities was better than having no years of facilities. We didn't want to defer the project completely. So we are moving forward with the project, irrespective of the outcomes of the BRT project.
Okay.
And then the New Hope Church Road widening project should get underway later this year.
Well, I do really want to thank you so much for putting together this great list, and for those of you in TV land, I think this is available with the agenda packet, or it's, you can see this as well. You can see a lot of things are happening, so that's pretty exciting. Anybody have any questions or comments about the project list?
I'd be curious, I know a few of these are going to potentially, they have had different design elements incorporated based on feedback we have given wanting to modify the UDO to have above curb facilities. So when I look at these, the ones that I can remember off the top of my head are like Carolina Pines, Atlantic, and Barwell, is that correct? But those are the only 3 of this list currently that would receive a different treatment option than like a striped painted facility at this time. I'm just
No, in
curious
fact,
to
I think
understand.
several of these, based on the commission's feedback,
Okay.
Old Wake Forest Road widening has significant changes to the
Right.
scope.
Okay.
Maybe
Could be there like a different column that could just like, if there was like a check, just for like, if there was something other than a painted facility being provided? I don't want to, if it's
we
too
can
much
provide
work.
you that breakdown.
Okay. And if there's a better way or easier way to provide that information?
Yeah, the Pool Road widening project was another one also that is including multi-use path instead of bike lanes.
Okay.
Eric, I saw a comment about requesting micro gaps be filled in. How do citizens go about requesting that?
So we have a program that's specifically what we call micro gaps. They're smaller than our normal petition sidewalk or city sidewalk projects, typically less than 300 feet, usually involves either a single property lot of frontage or even less than that. We have identified about 80 gaps around the city through citizen requests and or through field observations that staff has made. So if there's a question about those, folks can contact us directly and we can let them know if we've already taken an inventory of this project potential and if it would qualify for those parameters. Even though sometimes it's a short project, there may be construction obstacles that push it into the major project category. But we've got that as a resource. We're happy to talk to folks if they have any questions about that.
Any other questions?
I had a couple quick questions, Eric. Under the Greenway Crabtree Creek Lassiter Mill extension for the Crabtree Creek, we saw that in BPAC because of some wayfinding signage standards. Since it's in design and construction starting next summer, is there any need for us to look at the plans again? Or I think we've had at least one presentation. Are we good to go?
I don't know. We can check and see what the status on that is and what the outcomes of those wayfinding discussions have been.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Also, in the same group, Trailwood Drive to Lake Raleigh Trail on Centennial Campus, I believe that may be finished. Just wanted to comment.
The
on
Walnut Creek Trail Trailwood segment?
that. Yes. It's not, Paul?
Don't believe so.
Okay.
There's still that one section where the Trailwood Bridge was finished, from Trailwood back to where the trail goes on to NC State Centennial Campus, where you're on Avent Ferry Road, particularly there with the very narrow bridge across the creek. That's the section that's actually in design right now.
Okay. Thank you, I understand what you mean. I was thinking about the Centennial Campus portion that's done.
Right.
And any idea how many resurfacing, restriping bike lane plans that we'll be seeing this summer?
We had 4, I think, in the city's batch.
Okay.
The road diet and lane reassignment at Triangle Town Center along Triangle Town Boulevard was just implemented a couple of weeks ago. So that's gone through. And there's 3 others that are in the wings.
So it's a light year.
Yes.
That's all I have, Susan, thank you.
I've got one other question. For Ebenezer Church Road, I recently saw NCDOT is doing a project at Glenwood. Has there been any discussion about the Glenwood Ebenezer Church intersection?
Yes, and so I had that flagged for the project announcements, but I can go ahead and make that now. So we're working with NCDOT on a project to do improvements on Glenwood Avenue between Millbrook Road and I-540. And as part of that, there will be construction of both sidewalk and multi-use trail along each side of Glenwood Avenue. And this is a pretty strategic connection for us in terms of the connection between Millbrook, connecting up all the neighborhoods along the corridor to Umstead via multi-use trail, and then ultimately creating the opportunity for a connection into Briar Creek directly. So, but it does cross the city's funded project at Ebenezer Church Road, where we're doing pedestrian and bike improvements at that intersection. So we're coordinating with DOT. That project has a target year for construction of 2028. So there's no rush on that. The project was originally slated for 2023, and then the project slid back in terms of funding priority, but DOT opted to go ahead and continue doing the planning work so they can finish all the environmental documentation and meet all the federal benchmarks for that. So we have ample time to coordinate that. Our project will be on the ground before theirs.
Cool, thanks.
Any other questions about projects?
Excellent. Well, thank you. We really do appreciate that list. I think it's a great way to see all the great things that are happening and where we are. We'll move on to committee and member reports. First is mine, chair report. This past month, I attended the Smart Growth and Water Resource Collaborative meeting on June 20th at Triangle J Council of Governments, which was an interesting opportunity to talk about how smart growth and complete streets and things like that can interface with stormwater and water resources. Also attended the bike walk audit at the Raleigh Union Station, which is also our own Mary Sell was very involved in that. One of the other things, and that was, I think, Friday the 21st, was very interesting. We did some of us did biking. I think Paul Black did the biking one, and I went on the walking audit, and we were just kind of looking for information. It was a collaborative. Mary, maybe you can update us a little bit more, but it was collaborative with several of the Council of J's and the NCDOT, because they're looking at every train station in Raleigh for walkability and bikeability.
I can provide a brief update. This is to do with what I do, my day job. But we have a grant at Triangle J Council of Governments to look at first mile, last mile connections along the rail corridor between Raleigh and Charlotte. So this was an audit to look at any gaps that there may be around Union Station, but it's being done in concert with 2 other councils of governments in Charlotte and in the Triad, and it's funded through NCDOT.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable and interesting opportunity to kind of look at what's been going on down in that area. Of course, so much of the infrastructure down there is new. But anyway, that was a nice opportunity. Something else that has come up is, like I said, I wanted each committee to kind of talk about their top 1, 2, and 3 goals as we get to the different committee reports. If your committee's real short and we can't do it tonight, we can do it some other night. The other thing I'd like to do is implement an action item list from the meeting. And I think, our minutes usually very adequately capture things, but I just want to make sure that we're not losing things in the process. So what I'd like to start doing is kind of summarizing what the action items are that are coming out of the, out of each of these meetings before we end. And if others would like to jot notes of any action items they hear, I would surely like to appreciate that, because before we adjourn, I would like to make sure that we're going over any action items, and I think it's really just to kind of make sure that we're documenting kind of outstanding things that are still out there. So that was all for the chair report. We'll move on to bicycle planning, and we're a little bit Oh, you're here, but you were not at the meeting. But Dwight is not with us. He was held up in, he was supposed to be returning to Raleigh this afternoon. He got transportation delay. So he is not back in Raleigh in order to join us. He had hoped to do that. But Pierre, can you kind of give us a bit of an update?
Yeah, we didn't really talk about too much. Paul gave us an update on the neighborhood bikeway that's proposed between Ridge Road and the 5 Points area and some of the outreach efforts. We also met with the pedestrian committee to talk about the downtown Raleigh plan, but we'll wait for Elizabeth and Dwight to get back to have a better discussion on that.
And did you all prioritize your work plan? Do you have that information, or do we need to wait for Dwight on that as well? Do you think?
Let's wait for Dwight
Okay.
for that.
All righty. Community Outreach Committee.
Yes, we met this past month, and we welcomed Nick to our committee, which was wonderful to have him come to our committee. And then we went over our outreach committee points, and I think basically how the outreach committee work plan is written, you can go 1, 2, and 3. That's our top 3, because we only have 4 bullet points, so there you go. That's what we're going to try and push forward with this prioritized list. One thing we also wanted to bring up is that it is July, and so soon it will be Walktober. So if you want to start thinking about sponsoring a walking event, I think some of the ones we started talking about were the cemetery walk, and then also the Southeast Raleigh walk it got rained out last year, so we want to do that again, that Nate had brought to the committee, I guess, last year. And then trying to think, the sustainable walk was very popular as well. So if you want to start thinking about walking events that you can help promote and or provide guidance through our great city of Raleigh, get those wheels turning, because it's July now, but you'll be surprised how fast October shows up, and we have to promote these events. So that's something we started talking about. Anything else, Paul or Nick? Okay, well, we had a great meeting.
Good. Well, Nick, you were brand new, and since I'm only chair for another month, I just suggested you sit in community outreach. I don't know if that's your lifelong goal, but since we will be electing a new chair next month, I think everyone should be thinking about their interests in their their committee, because the new chair can make, that will be the time for adjustments. So anyway, just to let you know that, you just kind of got put there because there's only 1 month. There's only 1 month left, but we appreciate the report, Rebecca. Good work. Pedestrian Planning Committee, I think.
Paul, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
again, I think there was a fair amount of talk about the downtown plan and just trying to get ahead of where we think it's going to be with both the pedestrian and the bike committee, looking at sort of where we stood and what the priorities might be. But again, I think I'll wait for Dwight to come back for that as well.
Okay.
That was the crux of it. And
Streetscape.
And the streetscape was the other. Jason Myers came and presented on the streetscape prioritization methodology, and looked at sort of what the old methodology did, what the proposed new methodology would do, and then realigning some projects based on the amount of funding that there is and how the projects may have changed or morphed over the years since the original list was put together. And he brought that to the committee.
And Susan, I wonder if I might be able to move that the bicycle committee be the group that helps to kind of convene the conversation with the downtown plan, because I think there is some coordination that's still needed with Go Raleigh and perhaps Mila's team. So I don't know if and maybe it could just be a joint, again, like how it was last week with the pedestrian, to make sure all needs are accounted for. But I don't know if that might be a good committee to help facilitate some of those
Well,
conversations.
it's unfortunate, and Dwight apologizes profusely for not being able to get back. But once you can't get back in time, you just can't get back in time. But he had suggested perhaps he could disseminate some information perhaps to the members or to committees, and have some conversation about some of the outstanding issues of the
Whatever's
plan.
easiest. Okay.
And so I don't know, we've really decided exactly how, because he was going to obviously bring it up this evening, and he's, not able to do that. But I think
Yeah.
they're already kind of working on it, and I think pedestrian and them are kind of trying to come up with some recommendations to bring back to us for looking at what, maybe being more specific about what our concerns are about that downtown plan and how to help work to be, moving it forward and looking to find ways to look for endorsement for that plan.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would just want to be sensitive to whatever timeline Go Raleigh's on for reporting on that, and I just don't know what that is.
I don't know what
Yeah,
that is either. Does
Okay.
anybody? No, don't know.
At this point.
because she just mentioned in the fall that she'd be bringing forward that information.
Right. Well, since
Okay.
council is on break,
Sure.
I doubt that it's really, yes, I suspect we probably have till next month. But I think, Dwight had hoped to kind of go over some different topics that he had come up with, and then we can talk next month about that.
Yeah, the minutes state, as you just said, first open house June 25th, which was after our last BPAC, and then recommendations would be in the fall. The idea would be we would get in sync to help with those recommendations,
Right,
to
That would be
be
my hope.
moving forward as
Right.
opposed to anything else.
right.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Anything else from pedestrian planning? Are we good to go? Well, thank you much. On to old business, the bicycle parking standards.
Mr. Crane could not be here this evening and has requested this be deferred.
Well, there you go,
Thank you.
old business. I don't believe there's any other old business. We'll move on to new business. And the first is the trash collection bins. And I believe there's a pilot to look at these. And I think this came up because it was in the news a week or so ago. It sounds like a great way to make sure we don't have carts in the way of pedestrians and bicycles and others. So we're just kind of curious how it does impact the sidewalk, and we're so appreciative for you coming.
No, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Stan Joseph. I'm the Solid Waste Services Director for the City of Raleigh, and I'm pretty new. Well, not anymore. I can't use that anymore. I've been here about 11 months, going on 12. So, the Moloch project was kind of in the works before I got here, so I came into it, and I think it's really an exciting project. But let me just give you kind of a brief overview of where we're at on it. I think the campaign Dump the Cart, at the end of the day, I think the overall intent of the Moloch project is to get our downtown area where it's more sustainable and kind of make it more efficient than it is right now. Right now, we have hundreds of carts located throughout the area and various businesses. Some locations have 30 or 40. And I think that, pushing those carts out, and we're collecting them twice a day, 7 days a week, is number one. Not the best use of dollars. It's inefficient. But also number two, they present some issues as far as impediments to the sidewalks. It's unsightly. They smell in the summertime. It's just not, we can do it better. The Moloch is an attempt to explore one of several options that we're looking at. We've got a beautiful and growing downtown area, and I think that our services that we provide down there needs to be in line with it, and it needs to be sustainable. So the Moloch project is something that kind of occurs overseas. No one in the United States currently is actually using the system, although there are some similar systems that people are exploring. So if Raleigh were to take on the full-fledged system, I think we'd be the first in the United States to do it. But it's been done overseas in Spain and Amsterdam and England. Some of the existing Moloch containers have been out there for more than 30 years. So it's a very reputable company. But again, here's Hargett Street before. This is after the carts. Obviously, it makes a big difference. It creates more room to pass through, and you just don't have those unsightly things there. So a couple of things I've been talking about. I think the AD accessibility was one of the things that stood out to me the most, because not only are all these carts out there blocking the area, but it's blocking 7 days a week, twice a day when they push them out. So there's just something else we have to do there. As far as removing all the carts, it's unlikely that we will be able to remove all the carts, but we're certainly going to be able to reduce them, and maybe at some point remove them all. This is where we're at. We're knee-deep in the pilot program. We haven't began servicing, although we've been out there 3 times this week at 3 a.m. doing test runs. The Moloch folks came and they trained all our drivers. We had to get a special truck adapted in order to pull it out. There's actually an online video, Moloch on YouTube. You can actually see the process. But generally speaking, what happens is that cap top comes off. We lower a hook down from a hoist system, and we pull a bag. And I know you see what's above ground. It's even deeper below ground for a couple reasons. One, there's a lot more capacity, and also the fact that it's cooler down there keeps the garbage from decomposing quicker, so we can service it before we get any kind of smell problems. And some of the ones, the wooden ones are the ones that are recycling, and the other ones are for trash. And the art on the outside are wraps that were made from local artists, or designed by local artists. I think there were some concerns about accessibility, but you know, before we even selected that location, I think that there was significant exploration of how it would impact the buses that come around that corner, pedestrians walking, the bike accessibility and all those. And so we have selected that area because it seemed like it was most optimum and didn't have any, was not going to be an impediment for any of those considerations, including public safety, fire trucks, police department, those sort of things. I think as we move forward, if we move forward, because right now we're going to run this pilot for a year, collect a lot of data and see how it works. I think long-term what we're looking at is locating some of these throughout the city so more businesses can have access to transport their garbage and recyclables there as well. And we will go through the same vetting process as far as any kind of effect it would have on some of the things I mentioned, like the busing and public safety. I think kind of that's it in a nutshell, but I'm really here to answer any specific questions that you have about the project or about accessibility or anything about Moloch or solid waste in general. How's that?
Well, excellent. Well, thank you. Well, I think the question that I would have is, you know, you've done it at one location, and it sounds like that'll be there for a year. I guess the question is, you know, we're going to look at these right away, the cross sections, and there's already a lot of competition in that space, and the carts obviously were a problem. I'm wondering, like, the ones that you put in, are they dislocating parking or driving lanes, or how do you find the room for them? Because they're more permanent than the carts. So that's, you know, once you put the carts kind of come and go, although it's quite often. So how do you find place to put them
Yeah,
in?
so like where's that room coming from that we're taking?
Exactly.
So you want to, can one of you guys maybe answer? Got the transportation folks here to
Okay.
jump in.
Well, no, you know, it's just, like I said, we have such we're trying to figure out where
Sure.
bikes and pedestrians and buses and all sorts of things fit in the downtown already. So I guess I'm just wondering, where does this you know?
So Paul Callum, one of the assistant transportation directors here. So one of the unique things, how about go back to your picture here?
Sure.
And I'll point out actually a couple things that we have noticed here at this specific site.
Another one or this good?
That's good right here.
All right.
So we looked at this. So this was a no parking zone before the
Oh, okay.
Molochs were installed. And one reason we did that because the width of the car is wider. So buses were basically having difficulty making a right from Hargett on to Wilmington. But the one thing I'll tell you that I've noticed traditionally here, even with the no parking signs, is we would typically have tractor trailers, and they'd have their ramp across the striped crosswalk, which would then impede any kind of pedestrian traffic crossing on Wilmington Street. So this was actually, I think, a great area to install this, just because I think it kind of knocked 2 birds out with 1 stone on traditional problems that we have seen here along this. But you know, I would think kind of looking forward, you know, with the city of Raleigh and the team, we would look at spaces like this where probably nothing has been designated, you know, not looking at trying to take parking and, you know, any other type of capacity away on this. So we have some of these zones scattered throughout the downtown area.
So you do intend to put more in?
So I think, you know, the goal is we'll study the pilot, get the lessons learned from that, and then look at, you know, if it's feasible, then we'll lean on staying here to kind of take charge and push that product forward.
I don't believe it's a one-fit answer to the issues downtown, but I think it's one of them. And it's certainly worth exploring.
Or you mentioned that it may not get rid of all the carts.
It may not.
Yeah.
No.
Other questions, comments? Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. How are future sites potentially identified and prioritized?
Yeah, so I think once we get into the collection of data of this one, I think at some point, maybe halfway through the pilot, we're going to start looking at some opportunity areas that other sites could potentially go. I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of considerations we have to look at, including accessibility. But more importantly, is it in a location that it best serves the immediate customers in the area? Can they actually come there without traveling too far and those sort of things? But also, you know, areas like this one that you had, you know, a no parking zone that was being used for the wrong reasons. Well, let's use it for the right reasons. But I think at some point we'll sit down with transportation, Jen Baker from downtown, and just talk through all those things and start seeing what could a master plan look like if we decide to move forward with this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is a really cool project. Kudos to y'all on launching this. My biggest question, and it sounds like there was a very thorough analysis, is understanding as we have certain plans that are in flux, like our downtown plan, which has not been approved officially yet. So it's not a guiding document yet for how we are installing infrastructure. That will be a really important document if approved because it will help. We have no tier 1 bicycle facilities right now. You know, we just have what you see there. So as we implement these more robust bicycle facilities, if there are plans that are not already adopted, how are they embedded into this process? That's kind of a hard question.
With the
but-
MOLIC process?
Sure, right.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. You know, I'm not sure that I have the answer for that at this point. I do think that, looking at it from a solid waste perspective, right? I mean, I think that when we build things downtown, that we haven't always built them with accessibility to certain things, whether it be bikes or solid waste or what have you. And so I think a solid design plan before developers and new construction happens is probably the answer to that, which we're in the middle of establishing right now for solid waste. That's changing. As far as the bike and accessibility and how that works, I think we've been coordinating very closely with our partners, and we'll continue to do that. So I'm sure that's going to be a question that comes up.
Sure.
I think we'll address it at that
So
time.
you would just make sure that somebody from transportation, like Paul was.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
Sure.
We've got, this is completely interdepartmental collaboration. We've had probably 4 departments working on this project together.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind, I mean, going forward and looking at this pilot, you know, we may look at even kind of partnering with you know, some private ability to get on private property also. So again, this may not necessarily be
In an alley or behind.
That's
Yeah.
right, exactly. So
Absolutely.
I think it'll be some good lessons learned we'll gain from this, and then when opportunities arise downtown, maybe with, you know, development or whatever, to see if we can maybe incorporate some of that through that. So
Sure, okay.
I think when I started going downtown and watching our folks service these carts
Right.
and then blocking traffic for, you know, 20
bet.
minutes
Yeah.
twice, I was like, there's got to be a better way, you know.
Yeah,
so.
that flags another question I had in my head. How often will these be serviced, you know, offhand?
So we have a couple kind of technical things involved to help us track data. One's kind of, I guess you'd call it the smellscape. It's gonna let us
somebody
know what it's emitting and the levels, so we can kind of keep track of it. The other thing is a sensor in there that tells us and sends us emails about the capacity when they're
Oh.
getting full.
Okay.
Sends our operation folks an email when it's 80% full, so we know how we can service it. Right now, we'll probably service it more frequently than it needs to go until we can kind of see what kind of volume is being produced by the businesses that have signed up to participate.
Okay.
How many businesses are signed up to participate?
We've got 12 premier partners right now. They generate a lot of waste and recyclables, and so we're still taking folks to sign up in the area. Again, it boils down to, you know, that region around the Molochs. Where does it still make sense for them to transport it to there? So.
I just wanted to verify, we are looking at the actual location on the side.
That's correct. It's
So-
Wilmington and Hargett
So
intersection.
Wilmington is what, the street that's actually on.
That's correct.
Hargett is to our left
I believe
on
so, yes.
on this picture?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're like standing in Hargett Street.
Yeah.
And that would be Raleigh Times, and the bike parking in front of it is to the left as you look at that picture. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to exactly picture it so we could take a look if we wanted.
Yeah, take a walk down, check it out. They've built some really nice brick around it, so it's clean, and people are really looking at it a lot, so, yeah.
Anything else?
That's really cool.
I think it is. I think it is really cool, and we appreciate you coming to talk to us about how this project and improving sustainability, but figuring out how it impacts pedestrians and bicycles and making sure it's a win-win for everybody. It seems really like an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, and I'm sure the transportation folks will keep you guys posted as it rolls out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, something else to watch.
Yep.
Thanks so much. Does anybody have any other questions? Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Do appreciate it. I'm looking for my glasses on top of my head. The other thing is the North Harrington Street, West Lane Street pedestrian recommendations, and our very own Mr. Eric Lamb is going to present to us for this one.
So this was an item that was referred to both staff and to the commission a couple of months ago from the city council meeting. And it's based on a citizen concern about pedestrian accessibility around the intersection of Harrington and Lane Street. And what had happened was there was a condition that was created during the construction of the Metropolitan, and you can see that here, that some of the sidewalk area was closed. But because of the closures and whatnot, the city opted to install a temporary three-way stop at this intersection at Harrington and Lane. In addition to that, there were some temporary pedestrian accessibility accommodations that were put in while the sidewalk on the south side of Lane Street was closed. And so, as you can see here, these are heavy rubberized mats that were put in as an interim basis along property. This property here is a warehouse that is actually owned by Triangle Transit, Go Triangle. And so once the work was completed here and everything was opened back up, this temporary matting was pulled up. And so one of the folks that lived in the area came and raised a concern to the city council, said, hey, we've lost some accessibility here. We'd like to look at some options for seeing that restored. So staff has been taking a look at different options in this area. And one of the things that we've done is gone ahead and worked with city council to restore the multi-way stop at this location. So this is now a full multi-way stop. And you've got sidewalk continuity from here on this side as we're looking south on Harrington Street, crossing over to the new sidewalk on this side of Harrington and the new widened sidewalk along this side of Lane Street. We looked at some options for what it would take for us to go in and install sidewalk permanently along the west side of Harrington Street. The goal is to try and create connectivity across the railroad tracks to existing sidewalk that's here. You can see it's most accessible on the west side as you approach North Street. On the east side, it's a little more difficult because there's actually an access drive here in gravel associated with CSX's maintenance access that they have for their railroad and bridge here. So the sidewalk is actually pretty far removed from the tracks, and there's a pretty substantial gap here. So this is one of the challenges we're looking at. One of the things you can also see is that we've got some pretty substantial grade considerations here. So immediately behind the curb, the ground rises up fairly quickly, and there's a parking lot back up here. So in order to go through and do the construction along this portion here and create contiguous sidewalk to connect to this sidewalk here is going to require some retaining walls, and so some fairly significant construction. And one of the things that we look at when we're looking at capital programming is the question of where we go in and spend public dollars versus where we wait for private dollars to come in and allow for redevelopment to make those investments for us as part of their frontage improvements for the site plan requirements. there's a trade-off there that we can be waiting a little while until that private development takes place, but we're using those public dollars in other places. So we're keeping our powder dry and making the best use of public funds. So that's one of the things that we evaluate on a case-by-case basis. This is an area, as many of you know, that the Glenwood South area is hopping, is a hotbed of development activity, and we think that it's realistic that private development will begin at some point in the next couple of years and take care of this issue for us. So we're not making any recommendations for making any changes with constructing sidewalk at this time. One of the ideas that was raised was if we could go in and restrict the parking on this side, so take the on-street parking out, and simply just put in a white edge line, and basically put that in as a lo-fi type pedestrian solution. We're not excited about doing that specifically because it raises a potential ADA issue. We can't guarantee that something like that meets ADA requirements, and that's a function of creating safe crossings and installing tactile, I'm blanking on the name, the pads for visually impaired for indicating where the wheelchair crossings are. So what we have done is we have gone back to Go Triangle and talked about following through with this type of interim treatment once again. And they have been receptive to that. And so, like I said, we've got continuous sidewalk now on the south side of Lane Street. In fact, the sidewalk is now the wider sidewalk. That is the city's 14-foot standard that was required as part of the site development. Go Triangle is looking at a number of options. They've got some, I think, RFPs out now for tenants for this warehouse space. This was originally land that was acquired as part of the old light rail plan and some of their original planning that might be a light rail station at this location. Now that they have that, now that they've changed plans and whatnot, they're looking for users for this property. They're not interested in selling the property at this time, but they're already interested in finding users, and they've been amenable to going back in with doing some of the temporary improvements here at this time. So that's what we're looking at recommending as basically an interim basis, with the idea that there would be more permanent solutions on the west side as this site redevelops, and that would make for the best possible connection along the west side for sidewalk to sidewalk in this area. But as I said, the multi-way stop has been recently reinstalled. City Council previously approved that, so we've gone ahead and moved forward with that item. So we're here to answer any questions the commission has or any other suggestions the commission might have for us to consider pursuing at this location.
Thank you, Eric. It's kind of alarming to be that close, Glenwood South and downtown being right there, and that the fact that there's so little pedestrian and bicycle connectivity through this part of town is, I guess it shows its old warehouse uses. But I guess my question would be, if someone's going to upfit that building for use, would they not be required to provide pedestrian access at that time?
They might. It depends on what type of upfit it is, because the city has different types of site plan standards, depending upon whether or not it falls under a full site plan, at which point exactions for certain types of things like stormwater and fire safety and transportation all kick in. But because it's an existing building, there are certain categories of uses that are known as plot plans.
Okay.
And those plans are below a certain threshold for requirements that would generate any of those type of city exactions. So we don't know at this point until Go Triangle has a tenant in terms of what they're looking to do. But like I said, they've been receptive to going back in with a temporary option.
Right. So I think it's wonderful that they've agreed to the temporary, and in fact, somebody might have to upgrade that.
Correct.
In order to really make that building useful. Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, concerned about the impact to the Harrington Street cycle track. Does it continue to this far?
So the cycle track, as we had looked at it, was going to stop originally at Lane Street. And the reason why is that once you get into carrying it up to the railroad tracks, and let me be clear, our goal is to carry it all the way through and take it to connect to Peace Street, which then carries on to the Pigeon House and Devereaux Meadow Greenway that's planned, that connects further to the north and all the way to Crabtree Creek. But as talking about our first phase of implementation, we do have a significant obstacle here with the railroad crossing. So if we're going to bring a two-way cycle track up to this crossing, there's a concern that we are going to have to work with the railroads to look at potentially making some upgrades. There are such things as pedestrian scale crossing gates that we would have to maybe consider with something like that, but that's a potential obstacle with this section.
we had the same concern with West Street, if I recall.
Correct.
So the goal was to turn the cycle track on Jones to get over to Glenwood South. Is that still a plan?
That's one option that we have in our toolbox,
Okay,
yes.
which would be a block before we hit the city. Right? Okay.
But at this point, we're still hoping that our plan is to carry the cycle track as a phase up to Lane Street. And we want to continue working, the preferred option to get to the west was to carry it across and make a left on North Street, which is the next block up.
I have a related question about the stop signs, which I've noticed there's been a ton of stop signs going, which is amazing. In the downtown, I'll put the little flags on, oh, look, cool, another stop sign. What are we doing to encourage enforcement once those are in place? I had to recently email a church because the folks I think are used to not stopping there when they go every Sunday, and there's been a lot of people that aren't used to that traffic pattern that have been proceeding through like there's no stop sign there. So I'm just curious, as we find, well, one, two questions. How are we identifying locations for new stop signs?
Mm-hmm.
And two, is anything being done in concert with the police department to enforce those new installations?
I'll take the second one first. I'm not aware of any current programs in terms of working with RPD on targeted enforcement for four-way stops. I don't know if you know of any offhand. You do?
There's an overall plan with the downtown district. They noted that there were specific times and some specific locations where the data were showing an uptick in pedestrian incidents. And the
What would be
downtown district,
classified as a pedestrian incident?
any
There
kind of
have to be.
pedestrian crash that registers in the crash report.
Okay.
But they noticed like Wednesday afternoons were busier than others. I don't know, folks were late for prayer meeting out in we don't know, but they noticed a pattern in the data, and they've actually had an uptick in terms of getting officers to pick a specific spot and somebody to pick that. And I've got a more detailed report that was sent to me by Lieutenant Dana Knuckles from Downtown District that they're
So
working.
they're looping you in.
So I don't know that stop signs are a specific part of that, but again, if they have places where it was a pedestrian hotspot, if a stop sign's involved, it's going to get some extra attention.
Okay.
So back to your first question, the largest part of requests we receive about installing multi-way stops comes from citizens. Someone raises a safety concern, at which point we'll take a look at it and see what are the crash characteristics, what are the traffic characteristics of that particular intersection, and whether or not a four-way stop would be appropriate. We've done some expansion of four-way stops, multi-way stops, specifically in the downtown area in the warehouse district, where once we brought Raleigh Union Station online. In fact, what was really an interesting observation there was that people were actually treating those intersections as four-way stops, even when they had the right-of-way.
Right.
So there was a lot of design elements of the intersection that suggested that a four-way stop was appropriate. One of the other things that we've been working on is doing replacements of older traffic signals where specifically, most notably on the edges of downtown. We went through a couple of years and took down the old traffic signals that were in Oakwood. We took down a couple of traffic signals on the east end of South and Lenore Street as part of that two-way conversion. And then we most recently did the pilot in Boylan Heights along Boylan Avenue, converting those three traffic signals there to multi-way stops. It's a pilot, and that's been very successful and well received by the neighborhood, so we're working now to make that a permanent installation. In a lot of those cases, it's a good outcome with regards to helping moderate traffic, helping improve operations for pedestrians crossing the street, and just changing the overall feel. And then also, frankly, just changing the maintenance cost for the city. That's every traffic signal on average runs us between $5,000 and $10,000 per year to operate as it relates to taking care of the bulbs, taking care of the maintenance of the signal, and then paying for the power on the operation.
So is there a mechanism to recapture that cost and put it into maybe stormwater management where you have those big bollards in place right now that are kind of unsightly? Is there a way to, that probably costs more than $10,000, I know, but.
So the bollards on Boylan were specifically a measure that we did not have a multi-lane approach at the intersections. And here, let me talk from the picture here.
They're gone now.
Oh, are they?
They're already gone, okay.
The bollards are? Right. So what have you put in place? It's just nothing?
That's right. Yeah, so,
But I wonder if there might be a unique way to recapture. I'm sure there isn't. But if we're saving that $10,000 a year because we've done a more pedestrian-oriented treatment, why couldn't we amplify that through further investment?
that would be the responsibility of our stormwater staff. So these are not interchangeable monies necessarily. But one of the things that we did the bollards here specifically because we did not want to create multi-lane approaches with a four-way stop. it creates some confusion on who has right-of-way when you have two people approaching the same approach in the intersection. So,
Okay.
so the left turn lane has subsequently been removed.
Okay.
And so what that allows us to do is to create some more on-street parking, and in certain situations allows us to, in the future, consider curb extensions to reduce the pedestrian crossing. But there certainly always is that opportunity within different parts of the city to consider green infrastructure, and our stormwater folks have a program for that.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments?
I have a question, Eric. How wide are the revised maps?
I believe they are at least 4 feet wide, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they didn't look much,
No.
I was gonna say, they look like they're probably 4, which would be the minimum required.
They are very much an interim, temporary type use.
And are they hanging over the curb?
So let me show you the application that was done back at Harrington Street. So what you can see here
Yeah.
is, yes, it does hang over the curb to create basically an interim ADA ramp.
See, that it's a little bit concerning because I happen to do that. It's not going to hold us a 300-pound wheelchair. So I don't want somebody hitting it hitting the curb and tipping over.
Understood completely. So the point is that we do have the mat carry over and lip over the curb there. But you're right, this is meant to be not a permanent fix at all, but just something as a temporary solution.
I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
Excellent. Other comments, questions?
I think it's really good that you're thinking about this, because at the end of Harrington, we're gonna have Peace and West, which is the grocery store, condo, huge development of Peace Street, sort of Glenwood Avenue, whatever. And so Harrington, which has traditionally, since 2015, which is what I'm thinking about as in traditionally been a quiet, sleepy road, will not be a quiet, sleepy road anymore. So the idea of having pedestrians use the road as access, which is not what you're suggesting, is something that won't be a viable solution anymore. So including rubberized mats, or even considering like a deadline for the end of a temporary treatment, I think would be very good for the city, just because once that grocery store and those condos open up, there's gonna be a lot of traffic on West and a lot of traffic on Harrington.
There's already an increase on both.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then in concert with that, you know, we've done the realignment of Johnson Street here as part of the reconstruction with the Capitol Boulevard project. And then once the Smoky Hollow Phase 1 project is completed, the next leg of Johnson Street will be extended and connected through. So that creates a improvement of the grid here with a direct connection from Capitol Boulevard directly to Glenwood Avenue. So there's a lot changing on this north end of downtown for sure. And it will generate traffic, but it will also generate a significant number of multimodal users as well.
Yeah. Lots of improvements happening, and lots are needed, because it is not a very pedestrian or bicycle-friendly part of town right now, and as you mentioned, it's just getting worse. So excellent. Thank you for your presentation. Does anybody
you.
have anything else? All right. It is now time for board comments. Does anyone have a board comment? I will bring up that I mentioned, because Dwight is not with us, he did speak with our police liaison about the issue that Ms. Susan Stevens brought to us about her son being hit on Strickland Road. And unfortunately, he was supposed to report on that, and because I didn't know he was reporting on it, I don't have the information to present. But he did speak with the police about what triggers what kind of reaction. And I think it would be a good thing for us to charge him with bringing that back with him next time as well. Because I think we were all pretty concerned about how to look at that. And of course, that'll be part of the Greenway. When we start working with the Greenway plan, that'll happen as well. Any other board comments? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to announcements of upcoming events.
So the one public meeting announcement we had was regarding the Glenwood Avenue project that we were talking about earlier. And again, that's looking at Glenwood Avenue improvements between Millbrook Road and Lumley Road, the I-540 interchange. That meeting is scheduled for July 22nd. It'll be from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Embassy Suites out in Briar Creek.
What to 4 p.m.?
4 to 7, and that'll be an open house. It's a drop-in. There's no presentation, so drop in anytime between 4 and 7 p.m.
Okay. Other events?
I have an event related to the bike share program. So Citrix Cycle and Transfer Company will be hosting a celebration of the new station at Chavis Way next Tuesday from 12 to 2. And I'd love to see as many commissioners out there as possible. And in fact, I think we'll probably invite other cycling organizations to encourage overall use of the bike share program, but also just active use of our greenways and future bikeways, and so yeah.
Well, I might be able to use the bike share from Glenwood South and come visit you now that you have yours open. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you.
Other events?
Were you going to cover that open house?
And the kickoff for the Crosstown Neighborhood Bikeway will be at the Dove and Olive on August 13th. There'll be an open house from 4 to 6. And then we're going to ask folks who are interested to actually ride 2 of the alternative corridors with us so that we can come back with some refined recommendations. And then we'll look at what the schedule is to roll the rest of that out. But again, this will be the first of our neighborhood bikeways from the bike plan.
Okay.
And I did have one event going on, although it's in Durham. I know it's been hot, so this is an unusual event. It's a nighttime bike ride and 5K run. It's called the Bull Moon 5K Run and Bike Ride in the evening at sunset, starting through Durham, Saturday, August 3rd, 7:30 p.m. And both the bike and the running route finish up right downtown for a block party next to Bulls Stadium when it's completed. So that's Saturday night, August 3rd. And just in case you're concerned, I think last year about 1,000 people came out and we didn't lose a single one. So
Excellent.
that was
Good
good.
job.
Losing the threshold of
Well,
success.
exactly. Sounds great. Sounds like fun. Any other events? This is where we would now talk about our summary of action items. I wrote down perhaps one. Paul, you'd ask a question about wayfinding. Would you consider that an action item?
As part of the Crabtree Creek Greenway extension. That was my question.
But it was a question. It wasn't really an action item.
Correct.
Okay. So I think our action items are actually all from Mr. Dwight Otwell, who's not with us.
Don't show up.
Yeah, don't show up. And, well, I think we would like to continue on with getting him to make the presentation about his findings from talking with the police liaison about traffic accident investigations, and also ongoing information about the downtown transportation plan. So I would say those are the 2 action items that I can remember, if anybody knows anything else. All righty. Our next meeting of the BPAC will be Monday, August 19th in this room at 6 p.m. We will do our elections at the close of that meeting. We invite everyone to come and join us, and we will please stay safe and cool until that time. Thank you.